So let's go ahead and compare the iPhone 16e with another real budget device, the Samsung Galaxy A16 5G. Very interesting matchup with these budget devices. So these devices are sharing a lot in common. We start off with the names, the 16e and the A16 5G. These are like the lowest tiered premium type phones from each other, from Apple and from Samsung. Although the 16e from Apple is $600, the A16 5G, it is very, very cheap. You can get it pretty much for free when you're bringing your number over. You can get it from Boost if you just want to open a line. There's just deals everywhere on the A16 5G, but I'm gonna give it to you comparing it for the free price and comparing it for the $600 on the 16e from Apple. But also you can find that the 16e from Apple, the iPhone 16e, you can get it also for $300 from Boost. So you could get both of these at very low prices, but either way, the A16 5G is the king of free budget iPhones, and it has a lot to offer. So first off, the size and the weight, it's going to go towards the Samsung. It is heavier, it is bigger with a bigger screen, so the more portable device is the iPhone 16e. Build quality is going to be better on the iPhone 16e, glass front, glass back, while the Samsung is a plastic device. The iPhone 16e is eSIM only, while you have nano SIM for the A16 5G. Going back to the screen, so the iPhone 16e comes in at 6.1 inches, while the Samsung it has a 6.7 inches. So it's pretty much Android phones nowadays, cheap or expensive, are pretty big, and it just gives you more real estate to work with. Most people prefer big phones, and in this case, the refresh rate of the 16e is at 60 hertz. It's on the low end. Even cheap Android phones have higher end refresh rates. In this case, the A16 5G has 90 hertz. It's not top tier at 120, but it is a free device, while the more expensive 16e only gives you that slow old school 60 hertz. And also, not to mention that the top of the iPhone 16e has the older big notch. It doesn't have the dynamic island, but it is just huge compared to the pinhole camera size dot on the Samsung. So the Samsung screen, just bigger, more screen, and less, just no notch. It's just one little tiny hole for your camera. On the side of the devices, you do have an action button, is what they call it on the 16e. Basically, you could change it to do whatever you want on the device. Activate the flashlight. You could mute it, set it to a shortcut, do all types of stuff, start a timer, stuff like that. And the Samsung, it also could be done the same way, except you're gonna use a power button for that. So you got similar actions, but more flexibility on the Samsung. You could use a power button also for, if you press it twice, it'll take you directly to the camera. That's like an Android type feature right there. You're gonna get lots of updates on both of these devices. The iPhone will get around 7 to 8 years of updates. The Samsung will get 6 years of updates, but I think the internal hardware will pose a problem in the future. Speaking of the internals, the iPhone 16e is pretty impressive. The A18 chip, which is found on the 16 and the 16 Pro. And the Samsung has a lower end mid-range processor that does not compare to the powerful iPhone. You are not gonna run top tier heavy gaming or content creation editing features. It's just a fact. But everyday usage, you'll be fine on the Samsung. Also, you got 8 gigs of RAM on the 16e. That is top tier for iPhone. Same thing as the 16 and the 16 Pro. While the A16 5G from Samsung, it's kind of sad, but it has 4 gigs of RAM. That is on the lower end. That is, ooh, that's probably the worst thing about this phone, is probably the low amount of RAM. That's pretty low. But for most people on day-to-day tasks, they should be fine. You will run into some little bit of stuttering and apps closing in the background, but it should be rare. Both start out at 128 gigs of internal storage, but one is free, one is $600. You also get micro SD card slot on the Samsung, so storage wise, it blows the 16E out of the water. Now let's move on to the camera. The iPhone 16E is a very simple camera setup on the back. One 48 megapixel camera. It's very basic. Nowadays phones have a minimum of 2 to 3 cameras, so this new iPhone and the 16 family is kind of disappointing for a lot of people because it has that single camera, but it is really nice nonetheless for video and for pictures. Now, on the other hand, the Samsung A16, this one has 3 cameras on the back: the main camera, the ultra wide, and a macro. It doesn't have telephoto, but you do have that ultra wide, right, which I think most people will be used to at this point. The camera quality will be good if you have a lot of light, if you're outside or in the daytime. At night, you might see some suffering. But I think for most people that are just taking pictures, casually and uploading them and sending them in messages, it shouldn't be too much of a big deal. So, but the 16E is kind of disappointing that it doesn't have ultra wide. Both feature USB Type-C for charging. That is a standard on Android, and that is now the standard on iPhones, even on its cheapest phone. Unlocking the devices are different. You have Face ID in the notch at the top of the iPhone. It's very fast, very fluid, very reliable, as opposed to the side fingerprint reader on the Samsung. But that is also fast and reliable, and you could also open the phone while it's in your pocket as you're taking it out. So some people still prefer the side button for the fingerprint reader. I personally like it better than any in-display fingerprint reader found on other Androids. So my takeaways from this comparison, the internals are very important on the iPhone 16E. But everything else seems to be a big win on the Samsung. You have all the cameras. I forgot to mention, battery life is really, really good on both of these devices. 4,000 milliamps goes a long way on the iPhone 16E, while you get 5,000 on the Samsung, and they'll both get you good battery life. But I'm gonna have to give the edge to the Samsung here. And the screen on the front, it's old school on the iPhone. You just get more screen real estate on the Samsung. You have the micro SD card storage option right there. You're getting all this for free, folks. It is a bummer that you're not getting, depending on your ecosystem, you might miss iMessage and FaceTime and AirDrop and all that stuff. But you have the physical nano SIM card slot on the Samsung. That's a lot of people still like that. I think it's still the way to go, even in 2025. And I mean, basically, you really can't mess around with the price point. The Samsung is free pretty much everywhere, and if you have to pay for it, you don't have to bring in your number. You don't have to trade in devices. Boost, Cricket, all the carriers. It is an awesome, awesome phone.